Well, you'll notice you didn't share any of my stats from when I was a professional baseball player, which would probably explain to you why I'm here and not playing baseball on TV somewhere. So I'm glad we stopped at St. Thomas. I think I was a career 256 hitter or something. So if you don't believe me, you can look it up on baseballreference.com. Thank you very much for those kind words. This is great to be here, be back on campus. This place has probably doubled in size since I was here more than 22 years ago, where I met my wife, Janelle. It's just been an incredible experience. I want to also thank, I know she did as well, but I want to thank Sam and Claire, Madison, and Amanda for your help. You're going to hear me talk today about leveraging my resources, and there was no better example than this. I remember talking to Tim Fisher, about, I've given a lot of speeches in my career, but I've never done it alone. I've always had an army of people to help me, and so I was kind of intimidated when I was asked to do this, because I was thinking, I don't have these legions of people to help me write my speeches and put together my presentations. And we kind of brainstormed together, and we said, how about we pull together a group of really talented students to help you? And that was the culmination of the TomCom team, and you guys, I couldn't have done it without you, so thank you very much. Just one thing I want to share before I kind of get going. I talk 1,000 miles an hour. To be real, it's probably about 200 words a minute. I think I've counted at one time, but I've done some research, and I think the average person can hear about 400 words per minute. I've done that. If you look it up, it's true. So if I'm talking fast, just please listen faster, because I'm not going to be very good at slowing down. So my background, I'm a very proud St. Paul East Sider. I grew up in St. Paul. My dad grew up in Minneapolis. My mom grew up in St. Paul. I learned very early why the wind blows from west to east. It was because St. Paul sucks. My mom used to say it was because Minneapolis blows, so I think my parents went back and forth on that. And then I went to school at Cretin-Derham Hall, and like I said, a proud St. Paul guy, but that's really where I learned a lot of my work ethic. And we had very humble beginnings. We didn't have a lot of money as a kid. I had a great childhood. We just didn't have a lot of money. So my mom and I used to debate, were we middle class? I thought we were dirt poor, and she finally compromised begrudgingly and said, fine, but we're upper dirt poor. And if you ever see that in the dictionary, that's credit to my mom, so thank you for that. And then I came to St. Thomas, and St. Thomas really helped me kind of establish my values and define who I was going to be as a person, and really the foundation of who I was going to be for the rest of my life. And so, I came to campus here as this kind of, cocky, immature baseball player, and if you don't believe me, take a look at this picture here, 1994 St. Thomas baseball team. If I can zoom in for you here, you'll see this guy in the back row here with this kind of business in the front, party in the back hairstyle. That's me right there. Really tough guy, wasn't I? Wasn't I a tough-looking guy? I don't know. It's a lot of people in there are smiling except for me, so I'm not sure if I was upset that day or whatever. But before I move out from this picture, there's one other thing I have to call out here. This guy right here, that's none other than University of St. Thomas Hall of Famer Steve Pignato here. So can you please set the, what were you looking at? I'm not sure what. Everybody's looking at the camera, and you're looking into space somewhere. I don't know what was going on there. So no, thanks for being here, though. So that was our baseball team. That was kind of the foundation of where I started here at St. Thomas. When I talk about my values, there's 5 things that I would say really define who I am. Anybody you ask, first and foremost, it's about my family. My wife's up here crying, don't do that. And my family is the most important thing in the world to me. It always has been. When I think about St. Thomas, obviously it helped me start my family because I met my wife here. But anybody who knows me personally and professionally, we'll say the family's always been my top priority, and it always will be. Integrity, do the right thing, and lead a life with high ethical standards, high moral standards, faith-based. I mean, that's something that I don't just carry with me personally, but also professionally as well. Our #1 value for my new company, K1 Sportswear, is act with integrity. And it's very clear, everybody in the organization, that's the minimum price of admission. You have to have integrity. Next is accountability. And again, all these kind of go back and forth between both personal and professional. But accountability, it's about having goals, knowing what you're going to be responsible for, holding yourself accountable to achieving those goals, whether it's as a husband, as a father, as a friend. So that's something that I talk a lot about, not only personally, but like I said, professionally as well. If you ask anybody who knows me, I'm a loyal guy, almost to a fault. Like I said, I'm a loyal East Sider. I'm a loyal Raider. I'm a loyal Tommy. If anybody ever says anything poorly about any one of my friends or family, I get really defensive. Like I said, it's to a fault sometimes, but I'm a very loyal individual. And lastly is humility. And I'll be honest, it took me a while to learn this one. And again, I credit St. Thomas for this. I think I was a much more mature person coming out of this university than I was when I started, and I think you saw the picture of the baseball player. You can kind of see where I started from, but learning the value of humility, both, again, personally and professionally. I say this one because I talk to our kids about this a lot. Our kids have been very fortunate in different aspects of their life, but how important it is to be humble and to understand where you came from and understand how important it is to give back and to be generous with others and not take things for granted. So I want to get into my professional journey now, and this is really just a story, and I hope you can stay with me the whole time because I don't by no means know everything, but I've learned a lot in my career. I've made a lot of mistakes, which I'm going to share with you today, but I've also gotten a few things right as well, and I want to share that with you. But when I think about my leadership journey, it kind of comes down to three things for me. The first is around resiliency and adaptability. And this was so important, especially early in my career, about when I started to define my brand and let people know who I was going to be. I had to be resilient. I had to ask for feedback. I had to take feedback, whether it was positive or opportunistic. And I had to be adaptable to change who I was, and I'll share a couple examples of that. The second, and this was really when I got into more leadership opportunities, when I started to lead large teams, it was about being self-aware, understanding the impact I had on others, understanding how people felt when I left the room. It was so important, and it took me a while to learn that one, but it's so important as far as how to be a successful leader. And lastly is how to bring all this together, as far as a concentric learner. I've had a lot of learnings in my career, but without those learnings and those mistakes and where I've done some things right, I wouldn't be able to pull it all together to be the leader that I am today, so I'll share my thoughts on that. My leadership goals, two things. Every role I've ever been in, it's been about two things. The first is about delivering results, and the second is about be a leader that people want to work for. And I say those two things because they are not, and they can't be, mutually exclusive. You can be a leader. There's a lot of leaders out there, and quite honestly, a lot of people that I think have been very well-known leaders that have delivered phenomenal results because they drive so hard and they do whatever it takes to achieve results, but maybe people don't want to work for them because they're a tyrant or they lead with an iron fist. And in my definition of a successful leader, that's not it. If I don't want to work for you, I don't think you're a successful leader. Secondarily, I think there's a lot of people out there that are leaders that everybody wants to work for because they love me and they pump my tires and they tell me how great I am and they always tell me I'm doing a great job. But I think the challenge with that is, oftentimes you run into a challenge of not being able to hold people accountable and being accountable to those results. And so I think these two things have to go together. And there's a lot of things that, underneath each of these things. But to be a leader that delivers results and to be a leader that people want to work for are the two goals that I'll always have. So early in my career, I'll talk about resiliency and adaptability and where I really started to establish my brand and what that meant. So my first job at Target was as an entry-level business analyst. And it was a great job for me. I just got done playing professional baseball, and my first real job at Target was to be responsible for all the professional sports leagues and their apparel at Target. I mean, it was a dream job. And so, I could have went in here, and I could have, not that I would have ever coasted in, but I got some great feedback from a mentor of mine, Scott Nygaard. And he said, hey, who do you want to be? You know what, I can tell you're a talented individual, but what's your brand going to be? I mean, you're just starting out at Target. How do you want people to know who you are and know what you're all about? And what I was about is I had a ton of initiative, I had a ton of passion, I was super aggressive, and I had a very high level of pride. I never, ever wanted to fail. And I think that's what's driven me in life is that I have this fear of failure. I don't want to fail. I'm competitive, I want to be successful, I want to be a good husband, a father, a leader, a company owner, and that stuck with me early on. And I think as part of that, it's not only learning the value of a mentor because he gave me great feedback, but it's about, and any time you're in a new position, make sure that you think about how you're going to define your brand and how people are going to think about who you are. Next is something, this is probably, if you ask my kids, what's something that, we say more than anything to them, and it's about surround yourself with positive influences. Again, this is one of those things that straddles personal and professional. But when I was a merchandise planning manager in intimate apparel, which, yes, that's ironic. I went from men's college and pro sports to women's intimate apparel. It's a story for another time, but it was the first time leading a team. I had a small team. I had 4 people that reported to me, but I was responsible for inventory management and planning and forecasting and leading people. And I was intimidated because this is a lot of things I hadn't done in my career at this point. And I remember another mentor of mine, her name was Gina Springer, and she said, you know what, you got to surround yourself with positive influence. You got to think about who can help you do your job better. And so I reached out to my peers, and I had a really talented group of peers, and Mike Hara and Jen Langen and Carl Russo and Karen Treadwell, and these were my peers, and you're very good at leading people, how do you do it? And you're very good at forecasting, how do you do it? And you're very good at inventory management, how do you do it? And it helped me be such a better leader, not because I had to be the smartest person in the room, but because I understood the value of the people that were around me and how I surrounded myself with the right influences to help me be a better leader and a better individual to deliver these results. So that was a huge lesson early in my career. And again, I talk about it a lot personally as well with our kids and with our friends and family on surround yourself with the right people. Who do you want in your life? Who do you want to be impacting you? And surround yourself with those people and eliminate the people that aren't a positive influence on you. Next one is leverage your resources, and I was a buyer in pet care. This was a big job for me. I was at a $1 billion division, and again, kind of intimidating, a huge P&L. And again, I had planogramming, advertising, and forecasting, and sales plans. And I thought about, how do I surround myself with positive influences, but it wasn't enough. And this was one of these lessons to where, again, I took a lot of things on myself. I tried to take everything personally and do things on my own. And I got the advice that stop trying to be the smartest guy in the room all the time. And it's not because I was presenting myself in the wrong way, it's because I wasn't reaching out to support groups and different resources. And this is something that I'll talk about later, but this is one of the best things that I could teach anybody on my team is leverage your resources. You don't have to do it all on your own. So it was kind of this combination of being resilient to understand that I wasn't doing things in the right way, but also being adaptable to say, how can I be better? How can I leverage my peers? How can I leverage our support groups and leverage those people around me? And when that happens, what's amazing, and it takes so much pressure off you because you realize that there's people that are much better at you doing things that you put on yourself. And I think about that now in owning my own company. This is a manufacturing company. I grew up as a retailer. I have no idea what I'm doing in a manufacturing plant or as a plant manager. So how I think about reaching out to people that can help me be better is critically important for me. So, early on, it was all about kind of being resilient and being adaptable and defining my brand, and I made a lot of mistakes. I did some things right as well, but it's how do I take that with me now into the next level of my career? And this is where self-awareness for me became so important, and understanding the impact I had on people and on my teams. And this is something that, I think when I talk about, was I successful, it's not only did I deliver results, but what impact did I leave on people? And in the middle part of my career, my first big leadership job was as a group manager in merchandise presentation. And this was probably one of the biggest learnings I have ever had, and it was a big mistake that I made. I didn't approach it in the right way. And I came onto this team, and I came from merchandising. I was a merchant at Target my whole career up to this point. And so I went into a team that supported merchandising, and so I had a really good idea of what they did well, but I also had a really good idea of where their opportunities were. And so I came onto this team and I said, I got some great feedback. I said, don't make any changes for 30 days. I said, okay. So I waited 30 days and 5 minutes. And I was like, like I said, I was aggressive before. I'm sure that's not a surprise. But to my credit, within that 30 days and 5 minutes, I said, I want to reach out to some people and make sure that and kind of pressure test my vision for this team. So I reached out to the merchants, which is the team that we supported and the team that I came from, and I said, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? Does this make sense? They said, oh, it sounds fantastic. Yeah, go ahead. So then I talked to my peers within my new area, and I said, here's what I'm thinking, and here's my vision. Does this make sense to you? And that sounds great. Go ahead. I think it's going to be fantastic. So then I talked to my boss. His name was John Walburn at the time, another fantastic mentor of mine. Just had lunch with him last week, actually. I said, John, here's what I'm thinking, and here's who I've talked to. I've talked to my peers. I've talked to the merchants. And he was a merchant, so he got it. He's like, well, this makes perfect sense. I love it. It's great. Go ahead. So 30 days and 5 minutes into this role, I brought the team together, and here we go. Here's the vision. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why it's the right thing. Here's who I partner with. I've talked to the merchants. I've talked to our peers, and I've talked to John. Everybody's on board. What do you think? And they were like, time out. Like, we don't get it. Like, we're not on board. What are you doing? Our old boss thought we walked on water. She thought we were fantastic. We've always been told we were great. And why do we need to change? And I was like, my first question, which was the wrong question, was, how is this not obvious? Like, I partnered with all these people, and I was a merchant. Like, this makes sense to me. And what was painfully obvious to me, which is probably maybe obvious to some of you in the room who probably had better experience than I did at the time, was I never got my team on board. I never asked them their opinion. I never valued what they thought and how they might have been able to make it better. And it was a huge learning for me. And I came into this role, I was leading a big team, and I was excited, and And I learned the value of how to get people on board with your vision, and certainly how not to do it. And so, is that Sandy over there? How are you? You were there. You were there as part of that team, actually. Not my team, but she was one of the people in there. So does this sound familiar? Yes. It sounds familiar. She can vouch for me. So the good news about this story, though, is that I had to slow down. I had to get people on board, and I had to ask them. I said, okay, what do you think? What do you think makes sense? And something very powerful happened. And what happened is not only did we get to that very similar vision, and maybe I was 80 or 90% there, but that last 10 or 20%, they filled in the blanks. They filled in, and they made it that much better. And not only that, not only was the vision a better vision for the whole division, but now it was their vision, not mine. And as their leader, I could align resources and remove roadblocks and coach them and develop them and hold them accountable. And it was a huge learning for me, but I did it the wrong way to start. But back to being resilient, being adaptable, learning from that. I didn't think about the impact that presenting this vision would have on my team because I never got them involved, and it was a huge learning for me. From there, I went on to be a merchandise planning director, and this is a great role at Target because it's a transitional role. Typically, you transition through as a director to become a divisional, so it's a big learning opportunity, but it's also the first time in your career, and especially in the old Target, I guess, in the new Target, it's a little bit different. But when you become a director, it's the first time that you have walls, a door, an administrative assistant. And that matters. And I'm going to share an example with you next about this concept of remember the cube, but I wasn't thinking about that because I still saw myself as that entry-level business analyst. That's how I saw myself. And so I can relate with people because I used to be you. Well, people don't see me as that. They see me as this intimidating director with walls and a door and an administrative assistant, and I didn't think about the impact that had on people. So I remember I was about 6 months into the role, and we were delivering some great results. The team was a very talented team, and I went into a forecast meeting, and unfortunately, and this is a separate tip, but don't ever surprise your boss with bad news. That's just a tip for everybody here, right? But I got surprised with bad news, and it wasn't good news. It was really bad news, and we didn't hit results, and so I went into this forecast meeting knowing that I had to deliver a tough message to my team. I knew that, and I thought a lot about how to deliver the message, and so went in there and talked about how I was disappointed and how these results weren't acceptable and how we disappointed senior leadership and how we knew what we needed to do to deliver results, but we didn't do it. And I didn't expect it to happen again, and it was that kind of a message, maybe a little bit more sternly. And it was about an hour meeting, and then I left, and I was back in my office, and another mentor of mine, Tim Mantell, he came into my office. He said, "Tony, how do you think the meeting went?" I said, "Well, Tim, it was a tough meeting. I knew it would be tough. I knew I had to deliver a tough message. They didn't, meet the results. You know that. We worked on this together." And he said, "Yeah." He's like, "I think that's all fair." He said, "How do you think your team felt when you left the room?" I said, "Well, again, it was tough. They probably didn't like to hear the message, but they knew that they were probably expecting it." And he said, "I think that you have 6 people in there updating their resumes, and they all think they're going to get fired." I said, "That's not at all was my intention." I was kind of like taken aback. I'm like, "Was it really that bad?" He's like, "Nah, it was worse." I was like, "Wow, I did not, this is the guy, this is me right there. That was me, in that forecast meeting." When you think about how do people feel when you leave the room, don't be that guy. And I was that guy that time. And so, I could have been this guy. This was the opportunity for me, and this is what I should have been. And when I think about, the message that I could have delivered to that team, yes, they didn't deliver results. Yes, I had to hold them accountable. But you know what? I was their biggest supporter. And it was a very talented team, and I knew what they were capable of. And you know what? I want to be right next to them every step of the way next time. Let me know how I can help. Make sure this doesn't happen again. I'm your biggest fan. I know that these results aren't up to your expectations or not up to mine, but I know next time we're going to do better. It's a very different way to deliver a message. You know what? It's a tough message. They didn't deliver results. I'm disappointed, but you know what? We won't let this happen again, and I'm going to be right there with you. So how do people feel when you leave the room? I've probably said that. I've been on board my new company 5 times. I might have said it 100 times so far. When you think about leaders and managers, and how do people feel when you walk away? It's really important. So I mentioned this already, remember the cube, and this is something that there was a professor that came to speak to us, excuse me, at one of our leadership summits called Harry Kramer. He was a professor at Kellogg Business School at Northwestern, and he came to speak to, it was all the directors and above, it was about 250 people, and we had great speakers come through. But he said, everybody who works as an executive in the corporate world everybody started at one point in their career in a cube. And he said, and kind of back to my other lesson, like understand the impact you have as a leader to people that are currently in the cube, because you were there. And not just remember what it was like to be there, but remember the impact you had. Remember when you said something as a senior leader and all of a sudden somebody went off into left field and worked for a month to try to cure cancer, and they came back and said, I've got it. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, I didn't want you working on that. I had a thought in my mind, and all of a sudden you sent them off into a different direction. And the impact that you had, because people, and especially, you know, and where I grew up at Target, you had people that just wanted to run through brick walls for you. I mean, we had very, very talented people at Target. And so remembering the impact you can have on the entire organization, and you know, how you bring all your learnings together about early in your career and being self-aware, and at the end of the day, regardless of what level you're at, if you're a director, a senior vice president, or a president, a CEO, more than likely you started in a cube, and it's really important for you to make sure that you keep that connection with the broader team, because you were there at one point. So that was kind of my learnings around self-awareness, and my learnings around how I led people at larger levels, and the impact that I had on those people, and how did people feel when I walked away. That was kind of middle part of my Target career. And now I'm going to share a couple examples of how I really tried to bring it all together as a senior leader. And this concept of concentric learning. How do you pull it all together? How do you learn from your mistakes? How do you learn from where you got it right to really be a leader that can lead at a much higher level? This is an example that I'm excited about, because this is actually one where I got it right. And I credit all of my mistakes earlier in my career, you know, for this example. But I was a first-time divisional manager for toys and sporting goods, and it was a huge division, $4.5 billion business. I was replacing an icon of the industry. She was there for 6 years, always delivered her numbers. The team loved working for her. And here I am, a first-time divisional in this giant job, and you know, it was intimidating. And I remember thinking, I'm going to wait a little bit longer than 30 days and 5 minutes this time. But the good news is I had time. The business was in really good shape. I had a strong team. But one of the things that became painfully obvious to me early on is that we had a lot of priorities that we had to focus on. I had 2 divisions, and so in toys, we had 5 division strategic priorities. We had 5 guest imperatives, and then we had 5 overall merchandising strategic initiatives. So 15 priorities we had to focus on. Then I moved over to sporting goods, and I had 5 different merchandising strategic initiatives, 5 different guest imperatives, and the 5 same overall merchandising strategic initiatives. So I had 25 different things I was trying to figure out, and I was really struggling. I didn't know how to communicate this internally, externally, to our support groups, to senior leadership, as far as where we were at versus our objectives. And so I was like, well, if everybody in the company in merchandising is held accountable to 5 merchandising strategic initiatives, to me it made sense to align both of our divisions there. But throughout that time, like I said, I had a talented team. I started asking them questions. What do you think? And tell me what our priorities are, and where do you think we need to go? And I learned a lot. And about 3 months in, I scheduled an offsite, a strategic planning offsite. And I had toys on one day, and I had sporting goods the next day. And so I kicked off the offsite, told everybody how excited it was, and to learn about all the work that they had been doing. And I said, but before we start, I said, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. And if I ask a question and you raise your hand if you know the answer, and if you raise your hand, I might call on you, because I didn't want people raising their hand if they didn't know. So 30 people in the room, my entire merchandising team, all of our support teams, said, raise your hand if you can tell me what our 5 division strategic priorities are. 30 people in the room, maybe 5 or 6 people, like, please don't call on me, like, I think I know 3 or 4. I said, okay, put your hands down. Raise your hand if you can tell me what our 5 guest imperatives are. Every one of us wore them on our name badges. You could just look. 6 or 7 people, as they were kind of trying to look down like this, like, I think I know them. This is like 25, 30% of the room. I said, okay. I said, put your hands down. I said, raise your hand if you can tell me what our 5 merchandising strategic initiatives are. Every single hand in the room went sky high. And something amazing happened. The room exploded. Like, oh my God, we got too many things to focus on. We can't even communicate this. Nobody knows what they are. What are the guest imperatives? What are the strategic priorities? And I just kind of sat back and watched this happen. And everybody was talking at their tables. And all of a sudden, after a couple of minutes, somebody in the back raised their hand and said, wait a minute. If everybody here knows the 5 merchandising strategic initiatives, why don't we just align ourselves to that? I almost started crying. I was like, that's brilliant. I love that idea. Like, let's do that, you know? But I was a little cautious, and I said, wait a minute, you know, I can play devil's advocate now. I said, well, you guys just spent the last, year or 2 years developing these. You brought in external consultants to talk about what was important to the guest, and you want to throw all that away? Like, help me understand. Oh no, we can roll everything up, up into these 5. It still makes sense. That's the foundation of our core initiatives and our strategies, and it's just more around communication and aligning to these 5. And I was like, I love it. And then what I could do as a leader is I could empower the team. Ted, you know what, you're great at this. Why don't you take this on? Mike, what are you passionate about? This, I want to lead that. Go, fantastic. You go lead that. And you start to align people with where they're passionate about. And again, this wasn't my vision, this was theirs. And I got them there. I needed to get them there. But all of a sudden, they were all on board that day right there. And it allowed us to move so much faster and totally aligned. I could align resources, remove roadblocks, coach, mentor them, hold them accountable, all those things that I needed to do as a leader, being their biggest advocate for this vision that I was totally on board with, and they were as well. And so that was an example to where I was able to pull it all together for this big job and learn from my mistakes, and it was just, it was amazing to be a part of that. And like I said, a huge credit to the team because they were incredibly talented and helped us get there, but it was great. So this next one's around authentic leadership, and this could be an entirely separate, probably a full day speech about my Target Canada experience. But I got to be honest, it was probably the greatest career experience I've ever had. It didn't end the way I wanted it to end because we ended up shutting down the entire thing, and now we're no longer in Canada. But leading a team of people that were unbelievably talented to accomplish some incredible things that no other retailer has ever even attempted, much less accomplished. And so, early on, we had to build a technology infrastructure from scratch. We had to build a brand new supply chain in half the time it takes us to build a DC in the United States. We hired 20,000 people in every province across the country, including French-speaking Quebec, and it culminated with opening up 124 stores in a 9-month time period. It was incredibly exciting, talented team. We were written up in the newspaper, and we were on TV, and it was such a public event, which early on we leveraged. I mean, it was something that we wanted to leverage that media, the power of the media to do, and it was great. And we worked hard. I mean, this team, not to be too extreme, but they literally stopped the earth from rotating to make this happen, and I couldn't be more proud to be part of that team. And then we opened up stores in 2013, and that was kind of the big test. Like, how is the consumer going to respond? How is the guest going to react to our entry? And after a couple of weeks, we could see where sales were going to level off. And it became painfully obvious that we were way off the mark as far as our financial expectations. Sales were gangbusters out of the gate. We knew it was about 8 to 12 weeks until they'd settle down. Once they started to settle down, they settled down at a rate that was far below what our really aggressive expectations were. And they had to be aggressive expectations. It was a huge investment for the organization. It was a big step for the board, and we knew that we had to do everything it took to deliver these results. And so when these results started to change, all of a sudden the sentiment started to change. You started to see, even before we were bankrupt, about how Target's off the mark and there's empty shelves. And as great as it was to be a media darling early on, it was painful once the media turned, and it was all about how poor things were. And we were a public company, so when we released our results, everybody knew about it. And this really wore on the team. I mean, the team was just worn out, and they were frustrated, and they were scared. They didn't know what was going to happen. And I took this responsibility very personally as a leader. Like, I need to lead this team the best way I can. Otherwise, this whole thing's going to fall apart, and they're going to lose hope. And so, every day I walked into that building, my shoulders were back, my chest was out. I was a bold leader. I was leading from the front lines. I was a very, over-communicator to make sure that they knew what was going on, and they knew what I knew. And I always challenge myself to remain optimistic and positive and motivate, engage, and inspire this team through this incredibly difficult time. And I got a lot of really positive feedback on that, and I don't think I would have changed that. I know I wouldn't have changed that. I think that was the right way to lead. It was an incredibly challenging task, but the team needed a leader to be out there and to be up front and to keep them motivated to do what was seen as something that nobody else could ever do. But I got some feedback once that I'll never forget. Her name was Alana Santone. She came into my office, and she was a director, and I had quarterly meetings with my directors. Directors reported to my direct reports, who reported to me. So it was one level down, but I always had, wanted to connect with them and understand what was going on in their business, but I also asked them very specific feedback about me. How do you think I'm leading this team? How do you think I'm communicating? It was very specific, and I remember she said something to me once. She said, how are you Superman through all this? I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, I got to be honest with you, Tony, like, we're dying. Like, this is so hard. It's the hardest thing we've ever had to do. It's just draining on us. And, and every once in a while I see people walking around and they're kind of hanging their heads. And how are you Superman through all this? And I said, well, first of all, I take it very personally to have to lead from the front and make sure that we remain committed to our very aggressive goals. That's important because if I start hanging my head and if I start walking around and kind of slumping my shoulders, it's going to have a dramatic impact on the rest of the team. And so I don't want to do that. But it made me think about something, and it made me think about the power of not necessarily showing vulnerability as much as it is about recognizing other people's vulnerabilities. Because I think what I took away from that is that she felt like, did I feel like I was, just I was bulletproof, like no matter what it takes, we're going to get it done, and we're always going to be positive. And was I just out of touch with what was happening? Like these results aren't great, and here you are thinking, no matter what it takes, we're going to get there. But it's more about, hey, Alana, I get it. Like this is hard for me. Ask my wife. I mean, every time I came home, it was like, this is hard. Like, and I'd get home, we'd have a good conversation. All of a sudden, the kids would come around and like, phew, there goes the gas tank, right back up to full. Like, it gave me so much energy, and I'd wake up the next morning and I'd show up to work, and my shoulders would be back, and my chest would be out, and I'd be re-energized. But I don't think I took enough time to recognize what the team was going through all that. And not that I questioned my leadership authenticity, but I had a chance to recognize how other people were feeling and to just be more empathetic to what they were doing, but also help them understand how important it was to be this bold leader and to lead this team with confidence, because this was so challenging. The team needs us now more than ever. The last one I want to talk about is the value of the board. And in particular through my target candidate experience, I was fortunate enough to be in front of our board, I don't know if it was a half a dozen times, maybe 4 or 5 times. And we had a very, very strong board and a talented board, CEOs from many different industries and senior leaders from a lot of these very powerful companies and very successful companies. And I say this because before I went to the board it's one of the most intimidating meetings you can ever be in, because this is your board of directors, and you have to make the right impression, but you also have to be appropriately transparent. And obviously they're assessing me as a leader, and so I remember always being intimidated, and my goal for my first board meeting was to get in and out as fast as humanly possible. Pace of my speech helps that, but other than that, it was like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm doing this right. And I think having been in front of the board a second time and a third time and a fourth time and beyond, I really started to appreciate the value of establishing relationships with our board. And yes, I reported to the chairman of our board, and then he was responsible for the entire board, and I only saw him once a quarter, but I started to email them, outside of the board meetings and give them a call outside of the board meetings. And what I realized, which again is probably obvious to some of you, the board is your biggest advocate. They are there to help you be successful. They are there to challenge you and ask you questions, but also guide you and coach and mentor you. And I was very fortunate to have exposure to such a talented board, because they helped me through all these challenging times. And I'll never forget, Ken Salazar was his name, and he shared a quote with me, and it was the latter end of 2013, and he said, Tony, I just want you to remember one thing. And I didn't know how I was doing, and if they were upset. I mean, it was obviously the results were tough. And he said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Anybody recognize that? It's Martin Luther King. And it was a really powerful message, because it, not that it did nothing else but let me know that, listen, he's empathizing with me. That last example where I said I didn't necessarily empathize with my team, it's exactly what he did to me. Listen, these results aren't where we need them to be. I know you're disappointed. I know we're disappointed. I know Wall Street's disappointed. But you know what? You guys are doing everything you can. You've got the right team. You've got the right strategy. We believe in the plan that you have to get us through this and get us through this tough time. But listen, you're going to be evaluated based on how you lead through these tough times, not necessarily how you led through good times, because that's a lot easier. And then I took that responsibility back to my team, and I shared with them. I'm like, listen, this is the feedback we got. And the team was like, oh, the board gets it. Like, they get it. Not that we're off the hook, not that we're not accountable to the results, but the board is there to support us. They understand how challenging this is. So it was great. It was just a fantastic message from Ken, and then something that I can learn going forward as a leader. So I've kind of shared this, this beautifully, filled in purple pyramid. Kind of makes it look like I've got it all figured out, right? I've been resilient and adaptable. I've learned from my mistakes. I'm now a self-aware leader, and I pulled it all together as a concentric learner. And then I buy a company called K1 Sportswear. And clearly, you know how I grew up. I was an executive in the retail world, and now I'm the owner of a manufacturing plant of hockey jerseys. I don't know what I'm doing a plant manager. I have no idea. I've never done this before. And what's interesting is that this pyramid starts to now look like this. And it's like, no, I don't have it all figured out. There is so much more white space as far as my career and what I have yet to learn. And I think about going into K1 Sports, where the benefit of this bottom left pyramid is that I can understand how to ask for feedback, and I can understand how to learn from my past mistakes and be a self-aware leader. What impact am I going to have on the team? I put together a list of FAQs my first day on the job, and I did a lot of research and talked to a lot of people who have bought small companies like this before, and they said, well, here's your number one concern. Every company I've ever seen that's been bought by a new owner, there's their number one concern. So my number one FAQ was not, hi, here's who I am, I'm all about family, I'm a great leader, I can't wait to grow this business. It's, am I going to lose my job? That was number one question. And that's exactly what they were concerned about. So that's what I put as number one. And that alone, they were like, okay, whew, he gets it. You know, like he understands what our fears are. And again, it's about leveraging mentors and leveraging people that have helped me in my career. And it was just, you know, I can't wait. I'm at the midpoint of my career. I have a lot yet to learn. I have a great foundation to start with. And I think and when I think about, you know, this guy right here, this business in the front, party in the back, cocky, you know, I think big man on campus baseball player that I started out here at St. Thomas, you know, and evolved into a guy that looks a little bit sharper than I do today. I've come a long way, but I have a very, very long way to go yet. So hopefully you took one thing away from today, maybe two things away, but these are just my stories and my learnings, but I appreciate you guys listening, and thank you very much for being here. What questions do you guys have? None? Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. No, I can start calling on people. Joachim, you're going to be first if you don't. I think we have some microphones in the back and a couple people around here with microphones if you have questions. I'm going to have to start calling on people, or I'm just going to exit stage right. My vision for K1. Thanks, Bells. I mean, Mr. Belloc here at the table. You know, K1 it's really exciting. Bought this company in November. Last year was K1's strongest year on record, and this year is actually off to an even stronger start than last year. So, you know, first and foremost in the short term with K1, my priorities, and then I'll get into my vision. It's all about the team. You know, I'm this guy that has a former executive career that I think a lot of people question, can I connect with this team? And I have to. I have to for the health of the company. So my first couple of months has been all about the team. It's been about the culture of the team and improving the culture and letting them know, what I'm all about and making sure that they're committed to the long-term future success of K1. I live in the cities. I don't plan to move my family up to the Cloquet area, but I also made it very clear that I have no intentions of moving the company from Cloquet anywhere else. So that's first and foremost, is focus on the team. When I think about growth, it's three areas. First, it's existing market share. We have a lot of opportunity to pick up existing market share. We're already the largest hockey jersey manufacturer in the country, but we just picked up another deal this week, which is a really, really big league deal. It's confidential. I'll share that in a couple weeks, but it's going to be really important for our company. So existing market share is important. Number two is additional sports. Obviously, I'm a baseball guy. I have a baseball background. I think baseball is an opportunity. I think lacrosse is an opportunity. Sports that offset the seasonality of our hockey business is number two. And number three is additional product categories. So think about things like a custom bag program. Think about things like apparel and headwear. I think that's an opportunity for us. But, and I'm not even going to talk about international expansion because I've been there, done that. But it may at one point, well into the future, with the right leader, be a potential opportunity given how successful the Canadian and European markets are in hockey. So thanks for asking. Rito.
What are some technologies that really separate you guys from other people, other players in that marketplace?
I'll be honest, from a technology perspective, there's two things. One, on our capability side, we have quite a bit. We have a leading edge sublimation technology that is just fantastic, and without getting into how the 400-degree press turns the ink into gas to put it right into the fabric, yeah, that's only 4 months. But we have some great technologies around sublimation, around our graphics team, about the designs that we can do. But as far as an ERP or an enterprise resource planning technology, we don't have one. And I say that this company, and I'll say this politely, but it's kind of been run with smoke signals and carrier pigeons up to this point. It was a small town company that got to a point, and this is why the owner sold it. And these are his words now. He said, "This is as far as I can take it." So we need to invest in technology. We need to invest in additional equipment. We need to invest in additional investments in the team. But I think with the leader and an owner now who's willing to make those investments, I think the sky's the limit. I'm really excited. So, yeah.
So when the final decision was made about Canada, who delivered that message to your team and how?
Well, I was actually already gone, and so this was delivered. I left Target in May of 2014. They decided to shut that down in January of 2015. And so what happened was we had a new CEO come in, and with the new CEO, and obviously our old CEO clearly lost his job. His name was Greg Steinoffel, close personal friend of mine. He was a mentor of mine. He's done a lot for me in my career. He left. Me and a number of my leadership team left as well. And then a new CEO came in, evaluated it for 6 months, and just said, you know what? I think there was a belief, and I'll go on the record, and I've been on the record. I absolutely believe, without an ounce of doubt in my mind, Target Canada would have been successful over time. Absolutely. There was a place in the market for it. It's a phenomenal brand. We had a great team. It would have been successful. But a new leadership came in and assessed it for 6 months and said, you know what? It may be successful over a period of time, but it's going to take a long time to get there. And we've got a lot of other priorities, namely here domestically and with online and mobile and digital, and decided to shut it down in January. So I know a lot of people who were there when that announcement was made. It was an incredibly emotional announcement. It was a $5.5 billion write-down for the organization. $5.5 billion. We signed the deal January 13th of 2011, and by January of 2015, the whole thing was shut down after $5.5 billion. It was incredible. Mr. Yoakum.
The whole theme was talking about cube to boardroom and talking about the experience in a public company. Reflect a little bit on the differences and similarities in the private business.
Yeah, and I would say the question was around the difference between kind of being an executive in the corporate world and being part of a private company. This is new for me. I know it's it's kind of your background a little bit, but for me, being part of a private company is one of the things that's different is that I don't know if I've fully appreciated yet what to necessarily keep confidential and what not to. I'm used to everything's out there, financials, sales, profit, expenses, and it's a different world in a private company, especially a small one like ours. And so it's like, we want to buy a new printer for $50,000. Well, does that mean I don't get a raise? It's like, well, wait a minute. Yes, you obviously, it's all of these things. And so the impact that the team has on everything that I say is very different. And not only, yes, remember the cube, and those things are relevant, but I've never been somebody who's on a sewing machine making the wage rates that they make from small town Minnesota. I have to understand how to connect with this team. And I'd say for the most part, because of very high levels of self-awareness and getting feedback from people, I've done a pretty good job. I've made a couple mistakes. One, I delivered a message to one of my teams out in Painesville, Minnesota, and it was kind of this message of, well, if your family's your top priority, does that mean that we're never going to get a raise because your kid's got to go through college? And I was like, what? Like, I don't get it. Like, how does that translate? But again, like, wrong question to ask. It's like, listen, you're really concerned about that? Let me touch on that. Let me go back and explain to you what this means. I want to invest in this company. That's why I bought this company. So those kind of things, and it's all been about the impact of the team. On the business side, I have a lot to learn. I'll figure that out. I'll figure that out with my team. I'll bring in resources where I have some of those knowledge gaps. But how I communicate with a team that is a very different type of employee than I'm used to has been the biggest learning for me. It's been a total change. Yeah.
Being a small business owner is very different than working for a Fortune 100 company. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to change your career?
Said differently, like, what the hell am I doing? Like, is that what you're saying? Yeah, it's a great question. The question was around, like, why did I decide to buy a small company? It is a good question, and not that I didn't come through saying, I absolutely want to be a small business owner, and that's what I'm destined to do. Quite honestly, it came because I knew I was going to be transitioning out of Red Brick. I was still at Red Brick, but I was looking at a number of different opportunities. And again, through somebody in my network, his name's Paul Dominski, he introduced me to a guy named TJ Bonnet. And TJ Bonnet he was a small business owner. He bought a company called Limpro out of Fridley about, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And he was telling me about his experience and how amazing it was, and that, he bought this company, he's going to invest in this company, he's going to grow it. And I was like, wow, that sounds unbelievable. Like, how did you do that? No, actually, I waited about 3 or 4 months. And then after that, I reached back out to him and I said, you know what, can you help me understand the process you went through? I've never done this before, leveraging my resources, right? I said, how did you do it? Like, who do I need to talk to? What story do I need to tell? And he sent me a list of about 20 people. Here's who I talked to, here's a message I sent, here's what you're gonna need to do, and he was fantastic. And I remember reaching out to a couple companies, and he said it took him 2 years to find the right company. I talked to a couple other people, said it took him between 6 months and a year, and it took me about 20 minutes. Like, I was, like, scary. Like, I found, all of a sudden, met with a couple business brokers, and there was a sportswear apparel manufacturing company for sale. I signed an NDA. I learned it was K1 Sportswear. Our kids are all diehard hockey players, and half their jerseys are K1. I'm like, I know this company. This is a great company. It's here in Minnesota. It just, everything seemed right. And the scariest thing about it was that I find it too soon. So I spent about 6 months doing due diligence in the company. Brought in some financial resources, legal resources, a lot of other mentors. Tom, my father-in-law, helped me quite a bit. And I think when it got down to it, it's like, you know what, this is a business that is very successful, has a huge runway, produces the right amount of cash, and you know what, it was a big risk, but I dove right in, and here I am 5 months later. So, I'll come back here in 10 years and let you know how it went, but so far it's going well. So I have a lot to do yet, though. There was another question back here. Yeah.
Yeah, just reflecting back on Target Canada, if you had to go back and do things differently, what decisions or what pivotal points do you think in the process you would have done differently now that you know kind of the outcome and how things resulted?
Yeah, the question was about what would I have done differently in Target Canada. It's interesting. It's a great question. It's a question I get asked a lot. I'll answer it in 2 ways. One, October 2013, I was on stage talking in front of our entire team. It was about 900 people in our headquarters building. We flew some people up from Minneapolis, and I had a Q&A session at the end, just like this, other than 800 people. And somebody asked that question, and Greg Steinhoffel was our CEO at the time, our chairman of our board. And he stood up and he said, you know what, let me take that one. And he said, the biggest thing we would have done differently is we would have taken more time, and we would have done less stores in a more prolonged period of time. And I think that's the first one. We did way too much, way too fast. And so there's things that I wouldn't have done differently because they weren't my decisions. There's things that I think, looking back, the company may have done differently as far as the speed of the launch and the investment and how fast we had to get that return on our investment. But for me personally, the things that I could have done differently, one of them is try to get more Canadian talent on board earlier. I didn't move to Canada until August. Our talent acquisition team was on board shortly after that. We didn't have our first major class of Canadians hired until February 2012, which was a year into it. Now, we built a huge team from Minneapolis, very talented leaders, handpicked from the organization, but trying to get, local market talent as early as possible would have been really important. I think another thing is data. We had to input 10 million data fields from scratch. And having somebody that their entire job, I don't care if they were CEO of data, I would have put the most senior person possible on one word, and that was data. Because our data, we had SAP was our technology infrastructure, our data was a big challenge. We had, at one point, a 99.7% data accuracy, and Sonny will tell you this, in the US we're at about 65%. We had a 99.7% data accuracy, causing a 95% failure rate in our distribution orders to the stores. And so our data had to be perfect, and it wasn't. It was close, but it wasn't, and it made a lot of challenges. So I would have put somebody in charge of that. And so I think there's a number of things. I think some of the things, may have impacted the results. Some of the things may have been a little bit further upstream, but other than some of the examples I shared today, I think that there was a huge task at hand, and we need to do whatever it took to achieve those results. Unfortunately, we were just too far off the mark. Yeah.
As a young leader, how did you find yourself in that position to be a leader at Target? And was it competition? Was it right timing? Was it trying to you have to knock on a lot of doors, and how did you get into that position?
Yeah, it's a great question. The question was, how did I get in that position to be a young leader being asked to do this role? And I still ask myself that question today sometimes. And actually, that was my first question, like, why me? Like, are you sure? Like, are you sure? And not because I was, insecure as much as I was. This is the company's first international expansion. I have no international experience. There's other leaders that are out there. And so I'll give you the answer that was given to me, and then I'll give you a couple other thoughts real quick. I think this is probably, I think we're out of time, right? When I was talked about for this experience, it was, we can't go outside the company. We need this is Target's first ever international expansion. We need somebody from inside the company, and when we look inside the company, we need somebody who, and without listing all the things that it was, somebody that had, these skill sets that were going to be a good leader in this role, and they felt like I was that leader. But taking on this role as a young executive was really important because actually one of my first direct reports was a guy named Rick McGuire, who was probably one of the greatest mentors I've had in my career. And I reported to him about 3 years earlier. He was my boss, and he was at Target for, 25 years, and he was a senior vice president for almost 15. And all of a sudden, this was going to be his last role before he retired, and now I'm his boss. And I needed to recognize that. And Rick was great about it. I mean, he could not have made it easier. I mean, he was a big supporter of mine. But I also had to tell Rick, listen, you're in this role because I don't know how to do what you do so well. Like, I need to rely on you and depend on you. And I had a lot of other people that were reporting to me. Another one, Brian Berg, was a senior vice president at Target for probably 10 years before he took this role. He was a very well-respected senior leader, and now I'm his boss. And so it's important to recognize the talent that you have on your team. And it's not about, listen, I'm your boss and you're going to do what I say. It's, listen, I'm your boss and I'm going to make sure that you do exactly what you do very, very well. And I'm going to, again, align resources, remove roadblocks, coach you, mentor you, develop you, help you and help set you up for success with senior leadership. So having the self-awareness to recognize that, I think, got me a long way with that team because I had a number of people on that team that had far more years of tenure than I had. But at the same time, I was able to develop a level of respect and a relationship with them that they appreciated me as their leader because they knew I was their biggest supporter. So thank you for the question. I think that's it. Well, thank you very much. Thanks again for all the questions. And